My name is Allison Walker, and at 34, I never imagined opening my door to find my estranged parents standing there after 10 years of silence. Despite our toxic history, I let them stay when they claimed my father was dying. That decision led to them assaulting me while my 7-year-old daughter Lily watched in horror. What they didn't realize was that I'd been documenting everything, waiting for the perfect moment to expose their true nature. Before I dive deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about reclaiming power from toxic relationships. Growing up in Mapleton, a picture-perfect town in rural Ohio, my childhood looked idyllic from the outside. Our white colonial house with blue shutters sat on a tree-lined street where neighbors waved as they drove past. My mother Karen, with her perfectly highlighted blonde hair and manicured nails, served on every community committee. My father James, a respected accountant at the town's largest firm, coached Little League and attended every church function. We were the family others aspired to be, at least. That's what everyone thought. Behind our front door, reality was drastically different. My mother's obsession with appearances extended far beyond her own carefully curated image. From the age of 5, I remember her scrutinizing every aspect of my existence. My hair was never quite right, too frizzy, too flat, too childish. My clothes, despite being meticulously selected by her, somehow always disappointed once they were on my body. "Allison, you'd be so pretty if you just tried harder," became her daily mantra, whispered harshly as she yanked a brush through my hair before school. My father's presence brought a different kind of tension into our home. While my mother's abuse was constant and calculated, his emerged like sudden summer storms, unpredictable and violent. His drinking started after dinner, one whiskey becoming 3, becoming a half-empty bottle. Some nights he'd simply fall asleep in his recliner. Other nights, the smallest infraction, a glass left on the counter, homework spread across the dining table, would trigger explosive rage. "You're living in my house, under my roof," he would shout, face reddening as spittle flew from his mouth. "You think you're so smart, but you're nothing without us." Nothing. Physical punishment was rare but impactful, a grab of the arm that left fingerprint bruises, a shove against the wall when I talked back, a slap that was always followed by, "Look what you made me do." My mother never intervened. Instead, she'd silently clean up whatever had been broken, then lecture me about setting him off. In her world, his behavior was my responsibility, my failure. School became my sanctuary. I threw myself into academics, joining every club that would keep me away from home until evening. My teachers praised my intelligence and dedication, never suspecting it was survival rather than ambition driving me. By junior year, I had the highest GPA in my class, and college recruiters began reaching out. When Northwestern University offered me a full academic scholarship, I kept it secret for weeks, knowing my parents would try to prevent me from leaving. They had always made it clear that my role was to stay in Mapleton, marry someone suitable, and continue the family legacy of community perfection. I waited until the deposit deadline approached before telling them over dinner one night in April. "That's impossible," my mother said immediately, setting down her fork with practiced precision. "You can't possibly live alone. What would people think?" My father's reaction was more direct. "Absolutely not. We didn't raise you to abandon your family. Besides, who would pay for this? We certainly won't." "I have a full scholarship," I explained, heart pounding but voice steady. "Everything's covered. And I've already accepted." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the explosion. "You ungrateful little bitch," my father hissed, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the dishes jump. "After everything we've done for you." My mother's approach was more strategic. "If you leave, don't expect to come back. You'll be on your own, completely. Is that what you want? To have no family?" Looking at them, my father's rage and my mother's cold manipulation, I realized for the first time that having no family might be better than having this one. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I want." 3 months later, I left for Chicago with 2 suitcases and a backpack. My parents didn't drive me to the bus station. They didn't call to say goodbye. My mother sent one text, "You've made your choice. Don't contact us again." For the next decade, I didn't. Northwestern University's sprawling campus felt like landing on another planet after the confines of Mapleton. The sheer number of people was overwhelming at first, thousands of students from everywhere, all pursuing their own dreams without the weight of small-town scrutiny. My dorm room, though tiny and shared with a stranger named Haley from California, represented more freedom than I'd ever known. I could pin posters to walls without criticism. I could leave books open on my desk overnight. I could wear sweatpants to breakfast without anyone commenting on my appearance. Freshman year passed in a blur of introductory classes, late-night study sessions, and gradual friendships. By sophomore year, I had found my footing, declaring a major in marketing and securing an internship at a small Chicago agency. It was at a campus coffee shop during finals week that I met Ryan Taylor. He was a senior architecture student, tall with perpetually tousled dark hair and an easy smile. He noticed me struggling with my marketing statistics textbook and offered help. He'd taken the same course 2 years earlier. What began as a study session evolved into a 6-hour conversation. By the time the cafe closed, I felt like I'd known him forever. Ryan was everything my family wasn't: warm, supportive, genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Our relationship progressed quickly. By graduation, we were talking about marriage, and 6 months later, we stood before a judge at Chicago's City Hall, exchanging simple gold bands and promises. My career took off surprisingly fast. The agency where I'd interned hired me full-time, and my ability to work relentlessly, a skill honed through years of trying to earn my parents' impossible approval, led to quick promotions. Ryan joined a respected architectural firm, and together, we created the stable, loving home I'd always craved. When I discovered I was pregnant 3 years into our marriage, it felt like the ultimate confirmation that I'd successfully escaped my past. Ryan painted the nursery yellow, built a crib by hand, and talked to my growing belly every night. We named her Lily because I'd always loved how lilies grew tall and strong from even the muddiest water. The first few months after Lily's birth were everything I dreamed motherhood could be. Exhausting, yes, but filled with a love so powerful it sometimes brought me to tears. I took extended leave from work, treasuring every tiny milestone: first smile, first laugh, first time she grabbed my finger with her entire tiny hand. It was around Lily's 6-month mark that I began noticing subtle changes in Ryan. Small criticisms about the house not being clean enough despite my caring for an infant all day. Comments about my appearance, how other moms seemed to bounce back faster. Questions about every purchase I made, no matter how small. Do you really need another baby outfit? She'll outgrow it in a month. The house is a mess, Allison. What exactly do you do all day? Maybe you should try that diet your friend mentioned. The comments were so familiar they triggered childhood memories, but I dismissed them. Ryan was stressed about a major project. It would pass. Instead, it escalated. My postpartum depression, which I'd been quietly battling, became a weapon in his arsenal. "You're just not yourself anymore," he'd say, making my mental health struggle sound like a personal failure. When I suggested therapy, both for me individually and for us as a couple, he refused, saying, "There's nothing wrong with me. You're the one who changed." I was back at work by the time Lily turned 1, juggling client meetings and daycare pickups, while Ryan's work hours grew mysteriously longer. The truth emerged shortly after Lily's 2nd birthday, when I received a call from a woman named Jessica. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I've been seeing Ryan for almost a year. He told me you were separated, but I just found out that's not true." The divorce was messy and painful. Ryan fought for joint custody, but seemed more interested in punishing me than parenting Lily. He routinely canceled his weekends with her, moved in with Jessica 3 weeks after our divorce was finalized, and often forgot to pay child support. Suddenly, at 31, I was a single mother with a demanding career, a heartbroken toddler, and financial strain I hadn't anticipated. The agency where I worked was understanding at first, but as client meetings were missed due to daycare emergencies and pediatrician appointments, their patience wore thin. 8 months after my divorce, I was called into my director's office and gently let go. "You're incredibly talented, Allison," my boss said sympathetically. "But we need someone who can give 100% right now." That night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat on my kitchen floor and sobbed, the first time I'd truly allowed myself to fall apart since leaving my parents' house. I'd tried so hard to build something different, something better, and it felt like everything was crumbling around me. The next morning, I woke up with Lily's small hand patting my cheek. "Mommy sad?" she asked, her little face serious and concerned. Looking at her, this perfect, innocent person who depended entirely on me, I found strength I didn't know I possessed. I couldn't fall apart. I wouldn't. Within 2 weeks, I had applied to dozens of positions, taken a temporary job at a local retail store to make ends meet, and started freelancing marketing projects at night after Lily was asleep. 3 months later, I accepted a position at a smaller firm with more flexible hours, though significantly less pay. The real turning point came when I decided to leave Chicago altogether. The city held too many memories, was too expensive for a single-income household, and offered no support system beyond paid childcare. After researching family-friendly cities with lower costs of living and strong job markets, I settled on Minneapolis. The move was terrifying but necessary. I found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a good school district, transferred to my company's Minneapolis office, with a slight pay cut, and started over again. Ryan barely noticed, having moved to California with Jessica by then and reduced his contact with Lily to occasional video calls. It was in Minneapolis that I met Stephanie Miller, a kindergarten teacher who lived next door. She noticed me struggling to carry groceries while holding Lily's hand one afternoon and offered help without hesitation. That simple kindness evolved into the friendship I desperately needed. Stephanie became my emergency contact, my occasional babysitter, my confidant, and the adult conversation I craved after days filled with toddler talk. With Stephanie's encouragement, I also began therapy, finally unpacking the layers of trauma from my childhood and failed marriage. Dr. Bennett, with her calm demeanor and unwavering support, helped me recognize patterns I was determined not to repeat with Lily. "You didn't deserve what happened to you as a child," she told me during one particularly difficult session. "And you don't have to carry that weight forever." Slowly, session by session, I began rebuilding not just my life, but myself. By the time Lily started first grade, we had created a stable, loving home filled with the warmth and security I'd never experienced as a child. I had been promoted at work, made friends with other single mothers, and even started dating occasionally, though nothing serious. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. Which is why, when my doorbell rang on that ordinary Tuesday evening in October, I had no premonition that my carefully constructed world was about to be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. The doorbell chimed as Lily and I were finishing dinner. Taco Tuesday was our weekly tradition, with Lily proudly helping to chop tomatoes with her child-safe knife while I browned the turkey meat. We were laughing about her day at school. Apparently, her friend Mason had brought his pet turtle for show and tell, and it had escaped briefly, causing classroom chaos. "I wonder who that is," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. We rarely had unannounced visitors, especially on weeknights. When I opened the door, the shock physically rocked me backward. 10 years had passed, but I would recognize them anywhere. My mother's hair was now completely silver instead of blonde, styled in the same perfect bob. My father looked significantly older, thinner, his once imposing frame somewhat diminished. They stood side by side on my porch, like ghosts from a past life I'd worked so hard to escape. "Allison," my mother said, her voice exactly as I remembered. "We've found you." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. My mind raced through possibilities. How had they found my address? Why now, after a decade of silence? Was this some kind of twisted dream? "Who is it, Mommy?" Lily appeared beside me, her small hand slipping into mine. My mother's eyes immediately fixed on her granddaughter, a strange smile spreading across her face. "You must be Lily," she said, her voice softening in a way it never had for me. "I'm your grandmother Karen, and this is your grandfather James." Lily looked up at me, confusion clear in her expression. I had told her very little about my parents, only that they lived far away and we didn't see them. "What are you doing here?" I finally managed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. My father cleared his throat. "Could we come in? It's about something important." Every instinct screamed to close the door, to protect the safe haven I'd created from these people who had caused so much damage. But Lily was watching, curious about these strangers claiming to be family, and the neighbors across the street had paused their evening walk to observe the interaction. 20 minutes, I said firmly, stepping aside. "That's all." They entered my home like visitors to a museum, examining everything with barely concealed judgment. My mother's gaze lingered on the modest furnishings, the children's artwork magnet to the refrigerator, the stack of library books on the coffee table. "It's cozy," she said, managing to make the words sound like an insult. I directed them to the living room sofa while keeping Lily close. "Why are you here after all this time?" My father looked down at his hands, then back at me. "I'm sick, Allison. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." The news should have affected me more than it did. Instead, I felt strangely numb, suspicious of even this claim. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "But why come to me now?" "Family should be together in times like these," my mother interjected. "We've had our differences, but blood is blood. We want to get to know our granddaughter before." She trailed off, glancing meaningfully at my father. "And where will you stay while you're in Minneapolis?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "We thought we could stay here," my mother replied, as if it were the most natural suggestion in the world. "Just for a week or two. Hotels are so impersonal, and your father tires easily now." The audacity was breathtaking. These people, who had emotionally tortured me throughout my childhood, who had cut me off completely for daring to pursue independence, now expected to move into my home based on a sudden terminal diagnosis. "Mommy, can they stay? Please." Lily tugged at my sleeve, her eyes wide with excitement at the prospect of grandparents. Something her friends at school all seemed to have, something she had asked about more frequently as she grew older. Looking at her hopeful expression, I made a decision I would later question endlessly. Perhaps it was the desire to show Lily that I wasn't like my parents, that I could offer compassion even to those who hadn't shown it to me. Perhaps it was morbid curiosity about what they really wanted. Or perhaps some small, broken part of me still longed for the parental approval I'd never received. 2 weeks, I said firmly. "You can stay in the guest room. But there are rules in this house, and I expect them to be respected." My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, dear. We wouldn't dream of imposing." That night, after getting my parents settled in the spare room and putting Lily to bed, she was too excited to fall asleep easily. Full of questions about her new grandparents, I locked myself in the bathroom and tried to steady my breathing. My hands shook as I texted Stephanie next door. My estranged parents showed up out of nowhere. "They're staying for 2 weeks. My father claims to be dying. I might need emergency wine and sanity checks." Her response was immediate. "OMG. Door is open anytime. Just say the word and I'll create a diversion so you can escape." I smiled weakly at her message, then stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back had overcome so much: childhood abuse, divorce, single parenthood, rebuilding a life from scratch. I couldn't let 2 weeks with my parents undo all that progress. "You're not that scared little girl anymore," I whispered to myself. "You set the rules now." Still, as I finally crawled into bed, sleep eluded me. I kept remembering my mother's calculating gaze as she looked at Lily, my father's too convenient illness, the way they had tracked me down after all these years. Something felt wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. The first morning with my parents in the house, I woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of Lily's delighted laughter. For a disorienting moment, I thought I'd dreamed their arrival. Then reality crashed back as I entered the kitchen to find my mother at the stove, spatula in hand, while Lily sat at the counter watching her flip pancakes. "There she is," my mother said brightly. "We thought we'd let you sleep in. Lily's been telling us all about her school." My father sat at the dining table, newspaper spread before him as if he'd lived here for years. He nodded in acknowledgement, but didn't speak. You didn't need to do this, I said, immediately hating how defensive I sounded. I have a morning routine with Lily. Nonsense, my mother replied. It's the least we can do while we're staying here. Besides, I noticed your pantry could use some organization. The way you've arranged your canned goods makes no sense at all. And so it began. By the end of the first day, my mother had rearranged my kitchen cupboards, made subtle comments about Lily's limited wardrobe, and questioned my decision to let her watch 30 minutes of cartoons after dinner. My father, meanwhile, had spent most of the day resting, though I noticed him watching Lily with unusual intensity whenever they were in the same room. She's just like you were at that age, he remarked during dinner. Same eyes. Same curiosity. The comparison made me deeply uncomfortable, though I couldn't articulate why. Day 3 brought the first real conflict. I returned from work to find my mother had taken Lily shopping without asking my permission. They walked in as I was frantically calling Lily's after-school program, terrified when I'd arrived to find her already picked up. Where have you been? I demanded, relief quickly morphing into anger. The school said her grandmother picked her up. You can't just take her without telling me. My mother looked genuinely surprised by my reaction. We just want to get her some proper clothes. The things in her closet are so ordinary. And she's your father's granddaughter. She should have nice things. That's not the point, I said, struggling to keep my voice level for Lily's sake. You don't take her anywhere without my explicit permission. Ever. Later, after Lily was asleep, I established clear boundaries. No picking her up from school without prior arrangement. No buying her things without consulting me first. No criticizing my parenting decisions in front of her. My parents agreed with suspicious readiness, exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. The following days fell into an uneasy pattern. I would go to work, anxiety gnawing at me all day, then return to find some new small invasion. My mother had tidied my bedroom. My father had been teaching Lily card games I didn't approve of. They had answered my phone and taken messages without telling me. Work began to suffer as my attention fractured. I missed a major deadline, something that had never happened before, and had to apologize profusely to an important client. My supervisor, Michael, pulled me aside after a particularly distracted meeting. Everything okay at home, Allison? This isn't like you. I gave him the abbreviated version, estranged parents, surprise visit, terminal illness, and he responded with more understanding than I expected, offering flexible hours if I needed them. His kindness nearly broke me. I wasn't accustomed to such consideration from authority figures. Meanwhile, Lily was becoming increasingly attached to her grandparents. My mother showered her with gifts and attention, while my father told her stories about a childhood I barely recognized, one where I was happy, cherished, the center of a loving family. The revisionist history made me sick to my stomach, but contradicting it would only confuse Lily further. Stephanie became my lifeline during this period. She would invite Lily for playdates with her nephew, giving me brief respites from the constant tension. During one such afternoon, I confessed my growing unease. Something doesn't add up, I told her, nursing a cup of tea at her kitchen table. They're too interested in Lily, too quick to undermine my authority with her. And my father doesn't act like someone with stage 3 cancer. He's tired, yes, but not debilitated. Have you seen any medical paperwork? Stephanie asked. Prescriptions, appointment cards, anything. I hadn't. In fact, I realized I'd seen no evidence of medication or treatment at all. That evening, while my parents took Lily for an approved walk to the neighborhood playground, I did something I'd promised myself I wouldn't. I searched their luggage. The invasion of privacy felt justified given the circumstances, but my hands still trembled as I carefully sifted through their belongings. In my mother's suitcase, beneath neatly folded sweaters, I found a folder of legal documents. My blood ran cold as I scanned the contents, printouts about grandparents' rights in Minnesota, highlighted passages about custody claims, notes about my fitness as a mother. Most disturbingly, I found a draft petition for emergency temporary custody, citing my mental instability and unsafe home environment as justifications. Hands shaking, I photographed everything before returning it exactly as I'd found it, then retreated to my bedroom to think. They weren't here for reconciliation. They weren't even primarily here for my dying father to connect with his granddaughter. They were building a case to take Lily from me. That night, I called Michael, who had practiced family law before switching to corporate work. He agreed to meet me for coffee the next morning before work. After explaining the situation in detail, I showed him the photos of the documents. This is troubling, he admitted, but not immediately actionable. They're preparing, but haven't filed anything yet. And frankly, they don't have a case. You're clearly a fit parent with a stable home and income. They're manipulative and convincing, I countered. And they have resources. What if they make something up? Michael considered this. Document everything. Keep a detailed log of all interactions, anything concerning they say or do. If you're really worried, Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recordings. You could legally record conversations without telling them. That afternoon, I ordered small security cameras for the common areas of my apartment, living room, kitchen, hallway, under the guise of home security. I also began keeping meticulous notes of every interaction, every undermining comment, every attempt to isolate Lily from me. I observed my father more carefully too, watching for signs of serious illness. While he certainly looked unwell, I noticed inconsistencies. His appetite was excellent on days when he thought no one was paying attention. His exhaustion conveniently appeared when household tasks were mentioned, but vanished when Lily wanted to play. And he never once mentioned doctor's appointments or treatments. My suspicions were confirmed when I overheard a late-night conversation between them in the guest room, their voices carrying through the apartment's thin walls. "The judge will see it our way," my mother was saying. "She's clearly unstable, living in this tiny apartment, working all those hours, no male influence in the home. We can provide Lily with everything she needs." "What about the cancer angle?" my father asked. "How long can we maintain that?" "As long as necessary," came the cold reply. "Dr. Hoffman has already agreed to confirm your diagnosis if anyone checks. By the time they discover the truth, we'll have established enough presence in Lily's life that removing us would be traumatic for her." I lay in bed, frozen with a mixture of horror and vindication. They were planning to steal my child using a web of lies and manipulation, exactly as they had controlled me throughout my childhood. But this time, I wasn't a helpless child. This time, I was ready to fight back. The next morning, I called in sick to work and took Lily to Stephanie's before my parents awoke. Then I drove to the hospital where my father claimed to be receiving treatment. With a story about needing to coordinate insurance information for my father, James Walker, I managed to confirm what I already suspected. He had been diagnosed with stage 1 pancreatic cancer 6 months earlier, had undergone successful surgery, and was considered in remission with an excellent prognosis. Nothing like the terminal diagnosis he had presented to me. Armed with this knowledge and growing documentation of their true intentions, I began formulating a plan. I would not confront them immediately. That would only force them to accelerate their timeline or change tactics. Instead, I would play along, appear to be lowering my guard, while systematically building an irrefutable case against them. What they didn't realize was that in trying to destroy me, they had given me the perfect opportunity to free myself from their influence forever. All I needed was for them to show their true colors in a way that couldn't be denied or manipulated, and I knew, with growing certainty, that they eventually would. By the beginning of week 3, the atmosphere in my apartment had become unbearably tense. My parents had extended their 2-week stay without discussion, simply announcing one evening that they'd be able to stay another week or 2, as if they were doing me a favor. I didn't protest, knowing it would only accelerate whatever they were planning. Instead, I continued gathering evidence. The security cameras had captured dozens of concerning moments. My mother telling Lily that your mommy works too much because she doesn't want to be with you. My father coaching her to say she felt scared when I was upset. Both of them making subtle but persistent comments undermining my authority. I had been strategic about my responses, showing just enough backbone to seem normal, but appearing increasingly stressed and overwhelmed, giving them the narrative they wanted while protecting Lily as much as possible. At night, after everyone was asleep, I would download the day's footage, add to my documentation, and forward everything to Michael and a secure email account only I could access. The breaking point came on Thursday afternoon. I'd taken a half-day off work to attend Lily's school conference, where her teacher, Mrs. Reeves, had nothing but praise for her academic progress and social skills. I left the school feeling proud and momentarily lighter, only to have that feeling shattered when I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from the school office. When I called back, the administrative assistant explained that my parents had come to update Lily's emergency contact information, claiming to be her primary guardians while I was going through some personal issues. The school had felt something was off and had attempted to reach me for verification. White-hot rage coursed through me as I drove home, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just boundary crossing anymore. This was a deliberate attempt to establish a paper trail supporting their custody claims. I forced myself to calm down before entering the apartment, knowing I needed to handle this confrontation carefully. When I opened the door, my parents were sitting at the dining table with Lily between them, helping her with homework as if nothing was amiss. "Lily, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice gentle, "could you go play in your room for a little while? I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa about grown-up things." She looked between us, sensing tension despite my effort to hide it, but nodded and gathered her papers. Once her bedroom door closed, I turned to my parents, all pretense of politeness gone. "You went to Lily's school and tried to list yourselves as her primary guardians," I stated flatly. "You told them I was going through issues. You did this behind my back, without my knowledge or consent." My mother's face remained perfectly composed. "You're overreacting, Allison. We were simply making sure Lily had proper emergency contacts in case something happened to you. Given your history of instability, it seemed prudent." "What instability?" I demanded. "I've built a stable home and career. I'm an excellent mother." "Excellent mothers don't subject their children to poverty and isolation," my father interjected, his voice taking on the familiar contemptuous tone of my childhood. "Look at this place, barely 2 bedrooms, in a neighborhood that's clearly declining. No father figure, no proper family structure." "Lily has everything she needs," I countered, struggling to keep my voice level. "Love, stability, safety." "Safety." My mother laughed coldly. "We've seen how you lose your temper with her. The way you rush her constantly, never giving her time to just be a child. Not to mention your obvious anxiety issues." I realized with crystal clarity what they were doing, creating a fictional narrative of my parenting that would support their custody claim, gaslighting me just as they had throughout my childhood. The familiar tactics nearly made me doubt myself for a moment, before my hard-won confidence reasserted itself. "I want you both to leave," I said firmly. "Today. Now. I was wrong to let you into our lives." My father stood abruptly, his previously frail demeanor completely vanished. "We're not going anywhere. Not without our granddaughter." "She is my daughter," I said, standing my ground. "You have no rights to her." "We'll see about that," my mother replied with chilling confidence. "The courts tend to favor providing children with proper family environments. A single mother with your background, abandoned by your husband, history of depression, questionable lifestyle choices, you really think a judge will side with you over us?" "My background? You mean the childhood of abuse you put me through? The trauma I've spent years in therapy processing?" "Abuse?" My father's voice rose dangerously. "We gave you everything. Education, opportunities, discipline when you needed it. And this is how you repay us?" "With vicious lies." He took a step toward me, fists clenched at his sides. I stood my ground, though my heart hammered in my chest. "They're not lies," I said quietly. "You know exactly what you did to me." What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to react. My father lunged forward, his hand closing around my throat, shoving me backward against the wall. The back of my head hit the plaster with a sickening thud as he leaned in, his face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled, spittle flying from his mouth. "You were never worth the trouble." I clawed at his hand, struggling to breathe, as my mother watched impassively from a few feet away. Just as black spots began dancing at the edges of my vision, a small voice cut through the chaos. Stop hurting my mommy. Lily stood in the hallway, her face pale with terror, eyes wide as she witnessed her grandfather's hand around my throat, her grandmother doing nothing to intervene. My father released me immediately, stumbling backward as if burned. I slid down the wall, gasping for air, my only thought to reach Lily and shield her from what was happening. "Sweetheart," my mother said, her voice instantly transforming into sugary sweetness as she moved toward Lily. "It's not what it looks like. Grandpa and Mommy were just having a disagreement. Sometimes grown-ups get too excited when they talk." Lily backed away from her, tears streaming down her face. "You're hurting my mom. You're bad people." I managed to get to my feet, throat burning, and move to Lily, pulling her against me protectively. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, though nothing about this situation was remotely okay. "See what you've done," my mother hissed at me. "You've turned her against us with your poisonous attitude." "Get out," I repeated, my voice raspy but firm. "Get out now, or I'm calling the police." "And tell them what?" My father sneered, though I noticed he kept his distance now. "Your word against ours. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected grandparents concerned about their granddaughter, or the unstable single mother making wild accusations?" Despite the throbbing pain in my head and throat, I felt strangely calm. "I don't need them to take my word for it," I said, gesturing toward the discreet camera mounted in the corner of the living room ceiling. "Everything that just happened is recorded, including you assaulting me while my mother watched." The blood drained from both their faces as they registered the implication. For the first time in my life, I saw something I'd never witnessed in either of them: fear. "You're bluffing," my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Try me," I challenged. "Now get your things and get out of my home. You have 30 minutes before I call the police and show them exactly what kind of people you really are." They retreated to the guest room, whispering furiously to each other. I took Lily to her room, doing my best to comfort her while keeping one eye on the security app on my phone, watching their movements. "Are you okay, Mommy?" she asked, her small hand touching the red marks forming on my neck. "I'm going to be fine," I assured her, fighting back tears. Sometimes people we think should love us don't know how to do it properly. But that doesn't mean we did anything wrong. After putting Lily to bed with extra stories and reassurances, I returned to the living room just as my parents emerged with their hastily packed luggage. "This isn't over," my mother warned as they headed for the door. "You've always been dramatic, making mountains out of molehills. No one will believe that recording shows anything but a family disagreement." "Then you have nothing to worry about," I replied calmly. "I'm sure the judge will see it exactly as you do." After they left, I double-locked the door, then sank to the floor, allowing myself 5 minutes of silent tears before pulling myself together. My throat ached, both from the physical assault and from holding back sobs I didn't want Lily to hear. When I could breathe normally again, I retrieved my phone and watched the footage from the living room camera. Every moment was there in high definition: my calm request for them to leave, my father's violent reaction, my mother's complete failure to intervene, their attempts to gaslight both me and Lily afterward. I forwarded the footage to Michael with a simple message: "It happened." They showed their true colors. "What's our next step?" Then I sent a text to Stephanie: "They're gone. Plan B starts tomorrow." What my parents didn't understand, what they had never understood, was that the frightened, compliant daughter they remembered no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had survived their abuse, rebuilt her life from nothing, and would do absolutely anything to protect her child. They had taught me many lessons growing up, most of them painful. But perhaps the most valuable was one they never intended: how to recognize manipulation, how to document abuse, and how to patiently wait for the perfect moment to expose it. That night, as I checked on sleeping Lily one last time, I made her a silent promise. The cycle of abuse that had defined my childhood would end with me. My parents would never hurt either of us again. The morning after the assault, I woke before dawn, my throat bruised and sore, but my mind crystal clear. For years, I'd feared a confrontation with my parents, imagining I would crumble back into the frightened child I once was. Instead, their attack had crystallized something in me, a cold, precise determination that left no room for doubt or hesitation. I moved quietly through my morning routine, applying concealer to the bruises on my neck before Lily woke up. When she emerged from her bedroom, sleepy-eyed and concerned, I greeted her with a reassuring smile. "Are the bad grandparents gone?" she asked immediately, her small face serious. "Yes, sweetheart, I promised. They won't be coming back. And today, you get to have a special sleepover at Stephanie's house with Connor. Doesn't that sound fun?" Her face lit up at the mention of Stephanie's nephew, her favorite playmate, though she still seemed hesitant. "Will you be okay alone?" The question nearly broke me. My 7-year-old worried about my safety rather than her own. "I'll be perfectly fine," I assured her. "Mommy just has some grown-up things to take care of." After dropping Lily off with Stephanie, who squeezed my hand supportively and promised to keep her occupied and happy, I drove directly to Amanda Parker's law office. Amanda specialized in family law and had been highly recommended by Michael. I'd made an emergency appointment the night before, and she was waiting when I arrived, her office still quiet in the early morning hours. I showed her everything: the security footage, my detailed logs of my parents' behavior, the photographs of the custody documents I'd found in their luggage, medical records confirming my father's cancer was in remission rather than terminal. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of attempted custodial interference I've seen," Amanda said, her expression grave as she reviewed the evidence. "And the assault is unambiguous. We need to move quickly, though. They'll be preparing their own narrative." We spent the next 2 hours outlining a comprehensive strategy. First, a police report documenting the assault, with the video evidence submitted. Second, an emergency restraining order protecting both Lily and me. Third, a preemptive legal filing addressing any potential custody claims my parents might make. "What about their accusations?" I asked. "They'll claim I'm unstable, that I've turned Lily against them." Amanda's smile was sharp. "Let them try. I've already reviewed your employment history, Lily's school records, statements from her teachers, your therapy progress notes that you've authorized me to access. You're a model parent who has overcome significant trauma to provide a stable, loving home. Their claims will fall apart under scrutiny." From the law office, I went directly to the police station, where I filed a formal report about the assault. The female detective who took my statement watched the video footage in silence, her expression hardening as my father's hand closed around my throat. "You're lucky you had this recording," she told me frankly. "Without it, these cases often become he said she said situations. With it, we have clear evidence of assault." By noon, the initial legal groundwork was laid. I sat in my car outside the police station, checking items off my mental list before moving to the next phase. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Court clerk confirmed restraining order is being processed. Should be official by end of day." Phase 2 required a different kind of preparation. I drove to a coffee shop across town, one my parents wouldn't know about, and opened my laptop. For the next hour, I methodically tracked down contact information for key people from my hometown. My parents' pastor at First Presbyterian, the head of the hospital auxiliary board my mother had chaired, my father's business partners. I had avoided all connection to Mapleton for a decade, but social media made it surprisingly easy to identify who still held influence in my parents' circles. I crafted careful messages to each person, not mentioning the assault directly but expressing concern about my parents, increasingly erratic behavior, and concerning health situations. I suggested that my father's cancer diagnosis might be affecting his mental state and that friends might want to check on them both. The seeds of doubt planted, I moved on to phase 3. Using a secure email address created solely for this purpose, I sent select clips of the security footage, nothing showing Lily, but clear evidence of the assault, to 3 people: my father's medical partner at the accounting firm, the church elder who had known my parents for 30 years, and my mother's closest friend. The accompanying message was simple: "I'm sharing this privately out of concern for my parents' well-being. This behavior is completely out of character and suggests serious psychological issues that may require intervention. I fear publicizing this would damage their standing in the community irreparably, but as people who care about them, you deserve to know." It was manipulative, framing my actions as concern rather than revenge, but I had learned from masters. These carefully selected individuals would ensure the information spread throughout their social circles while giving me plausible deniability about publicly shaming my parents. By mid-afternoon, Phase 4 was ready. I had confirmed with Dr. Hoffman's office, using the medical authorization form my parents had falsified, ironically, their own deception now working against them, that my father's cancer was indeed in remission, with an excellent prognosis following his surgery 6 months earlier. The final phase of my plan was the most direct. I reserved a table at Bellissimo, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, and sent my parents a text message. I've had time to calm down and think. For Lily's sake, I'd like to discuss a visitation arrangement that could work for everyone. Dinner tonight at Bellissimo, 7 p.m. Just adults. The response came quickly. We're glad you're being reasonable. We'll be there. I knew they would interpret my message as capitulation, as fear. They would come expecting to press their advantage, perhaps even with their lawyer in tow. They certainly wouldn't expect what I had planned. I spent the remainder of the afternoon preparing myself mentally and emotionally. I reviewed my documentation once more, confirmed the restraining order had been officially filed, and changed into a high-necked blouse that concealed the bruises on my throat. The concealment wasn't for my parents' benefit, but for the other diners who would witness what was about to unfold. At precisely 6:55 p.m., I walked into Bellissimo, nodding to the manager with whom I'd spoken earlier. He directed me to a table in the center of the main dining room, not the private corner table my parents would have expected. I wanted witnesses. They arrived at 7:05, my mother in an expensive navy dress, my father looking remarkably healthy for someone who had claimed to be dying just weeks earlier. Their expressions shifted from smug confidence to confusion when they saw the table placement, but they sat down across from me nonetheless. "Thank you for meeting us," my mother began, her voice carrying that familiar, condescending tone. "We're glad you've decided to be reasonable about." Before we begin, I interrupted smoothly. I want to be completely transparent about this conversation. I placed my phone on the table, screen showing that it was recording. I'll be documenting everything we discuss here. My father's face darkened. "That's not necessary. We're family." "Family doesn't assault family," I replied, my voice steady. "Family doesn't lie about terminal cancer to manipulate their way into someone's home. Family doesn't try to steal a child from her mother." "Lower your voice," my mother hissed, glancing around at nearby tables. "People will hear you." "That's the idea," I said calmly. "I'm done with secrets and lies. So here's what's going to happen. You're both going to leave Minneapolis tonight. You will never contact Lily or me again. You will withdraw any and all custody filings you've prepared." My father leaned forward, attempting intimidation. "Or what? You'll embarrass yourself with wild accusations? No one will believe you." I smiled then, feeling strangely powerful. "They already do." I turned my phone screen toward them, showing the email confirmations from the police department, the court clerk, and Amanda Parker. "As of 4 o'clock today, you are both subject to a restraining order forbidding contact with Lily or me. The assault has been reported to the police with video evidence. Dr. Hoffman has confirmed that your cancer is in remission, not terminal. And right now, your friends in Mapleton are watching footage of you assaulting your daughter while your wife stood by and did nothing." The blood drained from their faces simultaneously. My mother recovered first, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You vindictive little." "Careful," I cautioned. "Threats won't help your situation. In fact, the officers waiting outside would be very interested to hear them." On cue, 2 uniformed police officers appeared at the restaurant entrance, visible through the front windows. I had arranged for them to serve the official restraining order at my signal. "You've destroyed our reputation," my father growled, his hands clenching into fists on the table. "No," I corrected him. "You did that yourselves. I simply exposed the truth you've hidden for decades." I stood up, gathering my purse and phone. "The officers will now serve you with the restraining order. You have 24 hours to leave Minneapolis or face arrest for violation. Any attempt to contact Lily's school will result in immediate legal action. Any custody filing will be met with countersuits for defamation and emotional distress, with the assault video as Exhibit A. My mother's perfect composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her face, not from remorse, I knew, but from humiliation and thwarted plans. "We only wanted what was best for Lily," she insisted, her voice breaking. "No," I said firmly. "You wanted to control me through her, just as you tried to control me my entire childhood. But I'm not that frightened little girl anymore, and Lily will never be used as a weapon in your games." I signaled to the officers, who approached the table with official paperwork. As they began explaining the terms of the restraining order, I walked away without looking back, feeling lighter with each step. Outside in the cool evening air, I took my first truly free breath in weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Lily's asking when you're coming to join the sleepover. She saved you pizza." The simple normality of it, pizza, a sleepover, my daughter waiting for me, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I had spent so many years believing I was broken by my parents' abuse, that I would never be worthy of uncomplicated love. Yet here I was, having finally faced my abusers not from a place of weakness, but from a position of strength and truth. As I drove to Stephanie's house, I reflected on how differently this confrontation could have gone if I hadn't been prepared, if I hadn't documented everything, if I had allowed guilt or obligation to override my instincts. My parents had counted on the daughter they remembered compliant, easily manipulated, desperate for approval. They never anticipated the woman I had become. Their destruction wasn't what I had initially wanted. Even after everything, some childish part of me had hoped for genuine reconciliation, for the loving parents I had never actually had. But they had shown their true nature one final time, and in doing so, had freed me completely from any lingering doubts or obligations. By the time I reached Stephanie's driveway, I had made peace with my actions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, explaining to Lily in age-appropriate terms why her grandparents had left, dealing with potential legal fallout, continuing our healing journey. But tonight, I would eat pizza with my daughter, thank my friend for her unwavering support, and celebrate the family we had chosen rather than the one I was born into. The first week after my parents' departure passed in a blur of legal procedures and careful conversations. Explaining the situation to Lily required a delicate balance. I wanted to be honest without burdening her with adult complexities or speaking too harshly about her grandparents, despite their behavior. Sometimes, I told her as we sat on her bed surrounded by stuffed animals, people don't know how to love properly. Your grandparents didn't treat me kindly when I was growing up, and they didn't treat us kindly when they visited. That's why they had to leave. Did they leave because Grandpa hurt you? She asked, her perceptiveness both impressing and concerning me. Partly, I acknowledged. But mostly because I realized they weren't safe people for us to have in our lives right now. Will they ever come back? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. No, sweetheart. They won't be coming back. But that doesn't mean you don't have family who loves you. You have me and Stephanie and Connor and all your friends at school. She considered this seriously, then nodded. We're still a good family without them. The very best, I agreed, pulling her into a hug. The legal aftermath required more attention than I'd anticipated. Though my parents had left Minneapolis as ordered, they attempted to challenge the restraining order from a distance, hiring a local attorney to represent them. Amanda, my lawyer, handled everything expertly, presenting the video evidence in a closed hearing that resulted in the temporary order being made permanent for 3 years. They're claiming the video was taken out of context, Amanda told me after the hearing. But the judge wasn't buying it. The footage speaks for itself. My parents' attempts to salvage their reputation in Mapleton proved equally unsuccessful. Through distant connections, I learned that my father had been asked to take a leave of absence from the accounting firm pending an internal review of his personal conduct. My mother had resigned from 3 community boards after other members expressed concerns about recent events. The most surprising development came 6 weeks after their departure, when I received a call from my Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister, with whom I'd had minimal contact since childhood. I should have reached out years ago, she said, her voice heavy with regret. We all saw how they treated you, but no one wanted to interfere. It was easier to believe their explanations than to acknowledge what was happening right in front of us. Her apology, while appreciated, highlighted how many adults had looked away during my childhood suffering. Still, her call opened the door to reconnecting with extended family members who had been kept at arm's length by my parents' controlling behavior. Therapy became a cornerstone of our healing process. Dr. Bennett, who had helped me process my childhood trauma years earlier, now worked with both Lily and me, separately and occasionally together, to address the impact of my parents' brief but damaging presence in our lives. "You showed remarkable strength," Dr. Bennett told me during one session. "Most abuse survivors struggle to confront their abusers so directly." I wasn't doing it for me, I admitted. If it had just been about my own healing, I might have simply cut contact again. But when they targeted Lily, something shifted. I found strength I didn't know I had. "That's often how it works," she nodded. "We'll do for our children what we struggle to do for ourselves." As the months passed, our lives gradually returned to normal, though with some significant improvements. The promotion I'd been working toward came through, bringing both increased responsibility and a welcome salary boost. Stephanie and I grew even closer, our friendship deepening into a chosen family bond that provided the support network I'd never had growing up. When Lily's 8th birthday approached in February, I decided it was time for a fresh start. The apartment, though filled with happy memories, also held echoes of those terrible weeks with my parents. Using my promotion bonus and some carefully saved funds, I made a down payment on a small house in a nearby neighborhood, still within Lily's school district, but offering more space, a backyard, and most importantly, a security system that gave me peace of mind. Moving day arrived with unexpected emotional impact. As Stephanie, Michael, and other friends helped carry furniture and boxes, I found myself occasionally pausing, overwhelmed by the contrast between my childhood home, where love was conditional and safety never guaranteed, and this new space I was creating, built on genuine care and mutual respect. "You okay?" Stephanie asked, finding me alone in the empty kitchen, staring out the window at Lily playing in the backyard. "More than okay," I replied honestly. "I was just thinking about how different this is from how I grew up. My parents' house was always perfect, but never felt safe. This place isn't perfect, but it's ours, and it's safe." "You built that," she reminded me, squeezing my shoulder. "Not despite your past, but because of it. You knew exactly what you didn't want to recreate." Nearly a year after my parents' visit, a letter arrived with a Mapleton postmark. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately and sat with the unopened envelope for several days, uncertain whether reading it served any purpose in our healing journey. When I finally opened it, the contents were both expected and surprising. My father acknowledged the assault, though he characterized it as losing control momentarily after extreme provocation. He mentioned receiving therapy, claimed to recognize patterns of behavior that needed changing, and asked for forgiveness, not reconciliation, just forgiveness. What struck me most was the absence of my mother's voice in the letter. It was signed only by my father, with no mention of her perspective or remorse. I wondered if she even knew he had written to me, or if this represented a small fracture in their previously united front. I never responded to the letter. Not out of lingering anger, but because I had nothing left to say. The cycle that had begun in my childhood had finally been broken, not with dramatic confrontations or public accusations, but with boundaries firmly maintained and a new life carefully constructed. As Lily flourished in the following years, developing her talent for art, making close friendships, growing increasingly confident and empathetic, I often reflected on how differently things might have turned out had I not trusted my instincts during my parents' visit. The temporary discomfort of confrontation had prevented years of potential manipulation and interference. The most profound lesson from the experience wasn't about revenge or justice, though both had their place in my healing journey. Rather, it was about the power of truth, how bringing abusive behavior into the light strips it of its power, how documentation provides protection when words alone might be dismissed, how speaking up can break generational patterns of harm. 5 years after that fateful October when my parents showed up on my doorstep, Lily and I have created traditions and memories that have long since overshadowed those difficult weeks. Our home is filled with laughter, honest conversations, and the kind of unconditional love I once believed myself incapable of giving or receiving. I sometimes wonder if my parents ever truly understood what they lost through their actions, not just access to their granddaughter, but the opportunity to experience genuine connection based on mutual respect rather than control. I hope, for their sake, that they found some measure of insight and peace. But my own healing no longer depends on their growth or understanding. For those of you watching who might recognize elements of your own story in mine, please know that breaking the cycle is possible. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Seek support from professionals and true friends. Protect your boundaries fiercely. The path isn't easy, but the freedom waiting on the other side is worth every difficult step. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to establish firm boundaries with family members? How did you explain complex family dynamics to your children? Please like and subscribe if you found value in this sharing, and consider passing this video along to someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their journey. Thank you for witnessing my story. Remember, the family we create through love and choice can be stronger than the family we're born into. Stay safe, stay strong, and know that healing is always possible.